All right. Hey, just like that, we're live on air. So, hey, we're pumped to have you guys, and welcome to this is really the first Take Action conversation where we're going to talk about budgeting and a budget software specifically called YNAB. So, what I want to do as we just get started is to kind of go around the virtual room here and have people introduce themselves. And why don't you just give us your name, kind of where you're coming from tonight, and answer the question of do you budget, and if you do, what do you use, to budget. So I'll start us off, and my name is Blake, and tonight I'm coming from outside of our nation's capital of Washington, D.C., as we're moving into our house, and I do budget, and I've been truly budgeting for just over a year now, and I use YNAB to do tool, and that's one of the reasons I've been motivated to kind of share that experience with other people like you guys and kind of talk through a little bit of that tonight. Tim, how about you?
Yeah, my name's Tim Longobardo. I'm in Kansas City, and I don't actually budget. I definitely don't in probably the traditional sense. I track every penny. And review that on a weekly basis and see where I'm at with different categories, but don't do any forward thinking, any projections, or try to stay within ranges or anything. And I'm pretty frugal just by nature, and try to make those decisions on a per decision basis. So that's where I'm coming from.
Cool. Leighton, you're on my screen. How about you?
All right. Yeah, my name is Leighton, another Smith brother. I live in Colorado Springs, so just about an hour and some change down south from Cameron. But I've just started using YNAB for just about over a month now, and I'm really liking it. My wife and I are doing it together, of course, and we've used Mint.com in the past, and we've used Excel spreadsheets just to kind of figure it out. We're both not quite frugal, but we're not big spenders, so just getting over to YNAB in the last month has helped us just by figuring out. I just got an oil change today, so per Blake's recommendations, things like that, I put that in the budget last month, and then sure enough, just did it today and took it out of that account. So just getting used to the small things, but looking forward to learning more.
Cool.
Justin, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Justin. Right now I'm currently living in Iowa City, Iowa, in school here. And go Hawks, we're still undefeated. A lot of doubters out there. But yeah, I've budgeted some in the past. I've used Mint.com. I started using it in dental school just kind of really casually, and then when I got married a couple years ago, my wife and I started using it, and we did pretty well with it for about a year, and then kind of fell off and found that it was easy to let things slide for a few weeks and then only check it every once in a while. So I saw Blake and Cameron talking about YNAB, and I figured I'd give it a try. So right now I'm on the trial, and I've been doing it for maybe 10 days so far. So I've liked it so far.
Awesome. I'll round us out. I am Cameron, coming from Denver, Colorado. Like most of you guys, I've been generally good with my money most of my life. I'm 90 days into using YNAB, so fairly new to that system. Before that, I was using Mint.com probably about 60% of the time, but mainly just trusting my instincts and how to spend, and knowing that I've always done pretty good with that. And saved all the money that I've needed to do cool things with using that. So that sounds like all of us, and I'll throw it back to Blake to sort of kick us off.
Cool. Well, hey, thanks, and it's great to have all you guys here. We're honored that you'd spend a little bit of time with us. So, hey, tonight what we're going to do is talk a little bit about budgeting, a little bit about YNAB, but what this is not going to be is like a tutorial of how to type in money numbers into categories or anything like that. We'll get into some specific questions, but really for Cameron and I, our goal is that you walk away from tonight with some different ideas, thinking about finances, maybe thinking about different ways that you could implement some of that thinking into your life, and to use what we're going to look at, the rules of YNAB and kind of that thought process and how we think that can help you not just with your money but also with your relationships and most specifically with your spouse, and how it can help you reach goals for the future. And so that's why we're here tonight. That's what we're going to talk about, and appreciate you guys joining in. So YNAB is a budget software, and so they have a software that you can download and you can use to create your own budget. But what they preach is a different way of thinking about money, and so YNAB is a different way of doing that. It is not. We've already heard a couple of people talk about how it takes some adjustment, and that's because the YNAB software is not just a glorified Excel spreadsheet that you use to put a budget in, however you define the word budget. It's more of a tool to use for this mindset, and the way they talk about the mindset is talking about 4 rules. And so that's going to kind of be our framework of what we talk about tonight. I'll kind of talk about each of those rules, how it's impacted me, and then we'll talk about, ask you guys your thoughts on some of that. And so the first rule of YNAB is give every dollar a job. And while that phrase may be something you've heard before, it may be something that you relate to budgeting. Not everybody does, and that's not necessarily everyone's definition of budgeting. So by giving every dollar a job, you're literally telling your money where to go. And so for me, I discovered that by using products like Mint.com, by using my bank's app on my phone, which is what I would do all the time, I could tell you, where all my money went without a problem. I could tell you what I spent for meals 3 weeks ago, what I spent for my plane ticket that I bought a little while ago. I could tell you all that because I was up to date on it. I was always on my bank's website. I was always on my bank software or app knowing what's going on. But what that was for me, I was being reactive. I was seeing where my money went, and this giving every dollar a job is me telling my money where to go. It's being proactive. And the difference that I found for that is in my past, using that reactive technique, I would get to the end of the month or get to the end of a pay period, and the money would be spent. And I could tell you where it was, but it was almost as if some of it disappeared. Like, I know I made this much money this month. How can my balance only be, X? I knew what my balance was, and I knew that I was trending towards that. But at the end of the time, there were some times where I was like, how could I have spent all that? And so that money was almost like it disappeared. And so this proactive approach, what I found is by telling my money where to go, 1, I'm not spending it all at the end of the month, but 2, I am thinking through how I want to spend that money in the future, and in the grander scheme of things, I'm thinking through what goals I want to reach. And a lot of goals, these are not just financial goals, but a lot of things that we want to do in life, it costs money. And so even just doing those things, whether it's visit family, whether it's buy this particular article of clothing or whatever it is, it's to reach those goals. And so for me, the giving every dollar a job became really the fun part of it, because it's going through and saying, I've got $100. Where is this $100 going to go? And if I want it to go to a goal, if I want to go to something fun, or if we need to go to a need that we have, like a bill, or all the things that we need money for to live life. So so that's rule 1, is giving every dollar a job. So with that, I would just ask, what do you think of when you think of the word budget? Is there something that comes to your mind that you guys think of?
I always I think of it in the corporate sense of budget categories where like office supplies. If it's getting toward the end of the month or the end of the year, so we better we better buy up a bunch of staplers so that we get this money back on the budget for the next year, so they don't cut our budget at all. I think of that a lot when I hear budget.
Yeah, it's great. Anybody else?
Yeah,
Strengths, really. I think of, groceries, gas, whatever maybe, and then just breaking it down from there. And that can be a good thing, and then it can also be kind of a stressful thing, or
All right. Anybody else having trouble with latent
very
speed?
comfortable at
Yeah,
least,
I'm
but
getting a little
that's kind of my view on that.
Okay.
All right. Hey, Leighton, you were coming in a little bit broken, so I didn't catch any of that. I didn't
Maybe you
catch
need
a lot of
better.
that. All right.
well, I will
Cameron, were you
say
about to say something?
yeah. So in the similar vein as you, Tim, that budget sort of has this sort of, either in the government sense, there's a budget crisis, a meltdown, furloughs for government employees and corporate budgets that are coming out and how we can cut budgets and things like that. I mean, I think of spreadsheets, Excel, calculations, um, and I think of always of spending and never as saving when I typically think of a budget. And recently, the past 2 to 3 months, my mind has been shifting to understanding that budgeting is spending money, but it's also allocating money, and that allocation can be savings, it can be long-term investments, and it's not always about, hey, are we over budget, under budget? The budget is what it is, and it's a holistic financial picture. But that's a very new way of me thinking about budget. It used to always be either pie in the sky, you read about a budget in the news or from, a corporate release or something like that. So yeah, Justin, do you have any thoughts? Like, what are the first things that come to mind when you think of budget?
I think I usually think of it as um, just like guidelines to set in place, or kind of like fences to keep me where I want to be in terms of spending. So I think of it in terms of spending. How much do I want to budget for food and for entertainment or for whatever I want to do. And I think that's how I've always thought of it in the past. So this whole give every dollar a job has been an adjustment in terms of thinking about savings and what really are those savings for. You kind of just leave them in your savings account anonymously, but what do I really want that money to be saved for? And it's kind of an adjustment to give it a purpose and to think about budgeting that way. So
Yeah, I think that's great. And you talked about kind of like giving your money a purpose, and I know one of the things that we've heard is, and that we've kind of discussed before, is how do we what is it like to be a good steward of this money? And from a I don't know, what are the ways, as far as like being a good manager of the money that you have, what are things that you guys think through of how you kind of process that kind of thinking? Is that something that you think about?
yeah, I mean, yeah, it is for me. And but I guess that's one of the questions I want to answer is, how can I do that well and know that I'm doing it well, other than just sort of vague principles of, I shouldn't be wasteful, I shouldn't live beyond my means, I should be generous, I should save, I should invest. But I have those sort of vague categories, but outside of that, what does it mean, I guess, a little more specifically to be a good steward of the money that I've been given? So
Yeah. Hey, that's great. I want to jump right on that, what you just talked about, kind of like how do I know that I'm being a good steward? Like, okay, I got it. My pastor on Sunday said, preached a sermon of, give 10% or whatever. But like throughout my year or my lifetime, how do I know I'm doing being a good manager of that? And I think one thing that's challenging is, you know, uh, whether it's me or a book you pick up or a guy you read online, they can give you like these general guidelines, and Tim, they can tell you like this percentage a month to this and this percentage a month to this, but what it really comes down to is for you and your wife to really look at your hearts and think, you know are we doing the things that are really important to us? Are we doing the things that are what we're learning about? Are we being responsive to things that the Lord is putting on our hearts? Are we being responsive to things that we hear needs in our community, to whether that's our neighbor or whatever? Because different things are important, and I mean, it's a fact that other people feel very strongly about certain causes, certain events, certain social causes, whatever, and you giving money more or less to something like that, or you not giving any money at all to anything, is I think hearing that from somebody else, it would be hard to get a good sense of it. But to get a pulse of how, are we, I guess, to ask the first question of what do we want to do with our money, and to put it through some of those filters, like you said, Justin, of okay, we want to give, we want to save, we want to invest some, and we're gonna spend some, and then whether you're breaking that down into specific percentages, if that's something you have some fidelity on, or if it's, what, something Katie and I do is, what we want to do? We just want to take $100 a month and use that as an opportunity to be generous. So whether that's me giving $10 to a guy holding a sign on the side of the road, I don't have to worry about where's that $10 coming from, or is this a good way to spend it? It's like I've got $100 every month that we're going to be generous for. Let's buy a gift for this person out of the blue. Let's give to this cause. Let's give to this fundraiser or something like that. And for Katie and I, that's been something that we like to do because we want to be generous people. And for us, we've looked at our numbers and we say that's kind of where we feel like we can do that. $100 is a number that we just said, how about this one month? And that's what we've started. And that could change, and that could be specific. Cameron, I see you wanting to jump in.
Yeah, I was going to say that, Justin, you said, you know all these principles and vague generalities, and that's me too, especially for 28 years of my life up until about 3 to 4 months ago, because one, I felt that I was good with my money. I made decent money where I wasn't ever super stressed financially, but all my giving, all my generosity, and all my saving was put it in a pile that I won't touch, and eventually I need to buy something big, and I can buy a car, or I can buy a new set of skis, or I can give money that way. But what I've done recently with this rule number one is give every dollar a job, is I have a category for so many different things, and so it's no longer vague, it's incredibly specific. And like Blake and Katie, he was saying they have a budget set aside for giving to be generous. So do we now, and we have a budget or a category for hospitality when we want to host people. So we buy extra food and maybe a bottle of wine. And we also have goals for not just a vacation, but hey, over President's Day weekend in February, we want to rent a little cabin in the mountains. And so we actually save money and put those dollars, we name them Vacation in February Ski Cottage. And so that's been really helpful. And I know some people say, it's having all your money in one big pot can be really confusing. And I think, Leighton, you mentioned that in some of the feedback prior to this conversation, that it's sort of like you don't actually feel like you're saving. But for me, to be a good steward with Lindsay and I's resources, being hyper focused and really specific has been a really interesting way to do that and really feel confident month in and month out. Leighton, do you want to talk on any of those frustrations you said that you were sort of having as you sort of were struggling to understand the concept or working on understanding the concept of give every dollar a name?
Yeah, definitely. Is my audio okay at the moment?
Yeah, it's working a lot better now.
Okay, good. Yeah, basically my frustrations stem from kind of what you mentioned, Cameron, of creating so many categories and dispersing money to each category. Maybe it's just a little bit, and then at the end of the month, or end of that meeting or whatever, wherever we're moving the money, it's just like, I'm going to be going to California in basically a year from now, and it's like, I would only have, if I put money in all these other categories, I'd only have like $25 a month to get to California, which is only a few $100 by then. So, one thing I did realize is we started middle of the month. So, that first month we lived off of half a month's income, and because we used a bunch of savings and just money that we saved up to kind of put into next month's income, if that makes sense. So now, we've had a few more meetings since, and it's a little bit easier, I think, to disperse it, but the savings goals were definitely tougher just figuring out because, especially with Ashley's income being lower right at the moment because of her student teaching, it's kind of like depressing looking a year from now and seeing that only those vacation funds are just a few $100 versus over 1,000 or something like that.
Sure.
Cookies.
I think, Leighton, somebody's got to turn on your speaker. Are you?
What?
I'm just hearing a lot of feedback. Hey, so Leighton, I think what you were saying was, or one of the things I heard you say was talking through, divvying up that money and kind of it only being like $5 for a vacation in California or a trip to California or something. And one thing I would say is one of the things that comes to people's mind of budgeting is like, okay, is spreading out my money across a 1 to 100 list and trying to figure out how much I can put in every single category. And one thing is that you don't have to need to feel obligated to put money into every single thing all the time. And that's part of that conversation of, okay, what's the priority right now? How much money do we have to divvy out, and what's the priority, and then what goal is the most important? And sometimes it comes down to either what's most important or what's soonest. What's the next thing that we have to spend on? And so you don't need to feel like you have to spread that across the things, but a little bit, can end up being a lot in a long time if it is some kind of long-term goal. And even if it is like we can only afford to put $5 towards California right now, so that's $5 more, and next time you might have some more money based on what you want to do. But I just would encourage you. You don't need to feel like you have to, give a little bit here and there to everywhere right away. Mm-hmm. You got to kind of figure that out. And I think one thing that I just wanted to hit on is when you're giving every dollar a name, that's something that is driven by a conversation, with your wife. It's okay. Here's the money that we have. Where is this going? What are the goals that we want to have? And it's not arbitrarily putting the money, and two, you're not just doing it unilaterally. It's a combination of the two, and that's what kind of helps drive those goals. So for you and Ashley to have a conversation about something that far out in the future is pretty cool, and that's what you're thinking about. But you're also having the conversation of, well, we want to do a vacation, and so that's where you can look at each other and say, do we have to do that? Do we really want to do that? And if we do, what do we need to sacrifice to get it? Because regardless of what anybody in this conversation makes, it's finite. So nobody has unlimited funds. Nobody that I know has unlimited funds. So there's always going to be some compromise. There's always going to be some sacrifice along the way to make some decisions about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense.
Hey Tim, I'm wondering as you're hearing some of the this talk about giving every dollar a job from someone in your intro, you were saying that you really don't budget. You are frugal by nature and you track your spending, but what is your long-term planning and savings goals? How do you sort of allocate for, a big purchase down the road, a new fridge for your house or otherwise? What does that sort of look like on your in your perspective?
Sure. Um, well, so let's see. So we're fortunate enough to be in a position where there's enough cash flow, enough income coming in, and our expenses are low enough that the cash flow is high each month. So that helps from an emergency situation. If an appliance went out, we would have enough residual income on a regular basis to take care of something like that. If we had a major auto repair or something like that. For example, Sierra got into a car accident back in January. We have really minimal insurance coverage to keep our costs low and to try to self-insure. We weren't planning for that. We didn't have money in a bucket for that. But because those expenses are so low, we were able to take care of those auto repairs. But as far as forward thinking, it's the largest majority of the money that is left over in that regular cash flow goes toward investments, and they're liquid enough that for emergencies or anything like that, we could pull from there if we needed to. I don't know if I answered your question or not.
No, it sounds good. So from what I'm gathering is you guys with your cash flow and with the way you put your money in investment mutual funds, it's pretty liquid, so you have access to it.
Mm-hmm.
But you don't set aside like, hey, $5,000 of this mutual fund is towards, our next home purchase or towards, our, around the world trip. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so allocating money for other things like that, we don't. So we don't have a category for a future vacation, or a new car purchase, or anything like that. I totally realize that this doesn't work out for everybody, but we're more fluid with those things. So if something comes up and we do talk about, we talk through our goals and our values often. Generosity, for example. So if something came up and there was someone who had a need, we would assess the situation and restructure all of those allocations if we needed to meet that. And again, that we have some freedom to do that, so that makes that a little bit easier. But it's just more fluid. It's just a case by case basis, and it's worked so far.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense to me, Tim, because I think for me that's exactly how I was a year ago, and it's not that that's wrong by any means, and that's not what I'm trying to say. I think I was kind of in that situation. I had a great job. It wasn't at a point where it was like, if I don't have total planning and allocations of everything, I won't be able to make next month's rent. It was really for me and Katie, it was kind of like, well, do you want to do it? Balance, I look at the balance, and that could be the determining factor of whether or not how we made that decision. And I think for me, what changed was when I started to assign those dollars. And when I say assign the dollars, it's the income for the month that I'm assigning at the time. And when I assign those dollars, I started, realizing there's things that kept coming up that kind of kept surprising me, even though They were things that you can predict. I mean, emergencies do happen, and bad stuff happens, and Christmas happens every year around the end of December. And and it was always like, well, it's December, I mean, you want to get this gift or you want to get this gift. And for us, it was like, okay, we can, and whatever the amount was, that just changed the balance sheet. But what I found by assigning them was I ended up having more money to do more things with because I was being intentional with how that money went. And so whether it was Christmas or a vacation or whatever, by just consciously thinking through, okay, this is a potential spend, it's not that I'm limited or I'm forced to spend it in that. It's just that's where it's allocated. Then I started to see where the priority was more for me and for Katie, and we could say, okay, you know what, this is what we've been doing, and we've spent this much on Christmas. What I'd rather do is be able to do, the thing that we couldn't do because we didn't have the balance sheet didn't allow it or whatever. And I think that's just one of the things that changed. I almost felt more freedom because I had specific funds available, and it was confidence in order to and able to make that decision of, yes, I can do this thing and I want to do this thing, and I have the money to do this thing. So it was confidence and a freedom to do that because I had fine-tuned that down, into those allocations.
Yeah, I found that it's been really helpful for my wife and I. I realized she already kind of naturally does the give every dollar a job thing, which is strange, but so I'm naturally more of a spender. She's more of a saver, and so if we get, any kind of money, if it's, someone gives us money for one of our birthdays, she in her mind assigns it a category, and she's like, oh, we can use it for this, and I'm like, well, it's just part of our general pot. We have this money now, we don't have to assign it to the meal next week. But she was actually already doing that, which is good. But it's really helped me sort of hone in where do I actually want to spend money, because it left to myself, I would just buy things that I want, and then at the end of the month realize I spent too much. And Laura, it helps her because she has a tendency to feel guilty when we do spend money, even though it's okay. And so if I'm like, no, it's okay, we set aside this much to go out to eat this month, or we have a category for date night so that we can go out and have a date and not have to cook dinner every night of the week, let's feel good about this and do it. And so that's just been helpful for us.
Yeah, so Tim, to go back to you, is there, even though you have that confidence with the amount of money you have on hand or access to, are there times when, even though you can do it, do you question, whether you should, or is there maybe that the lack of confidence? I don't know how to put that in a less pejorative way, but yeah. I don't know. Does any of that ring with you?
I mean, so one thing that definitely is a component here is that. So Justin was saying that him and his wife one's a saver, one's a spender, and for my wife and I, we're both savers by nature too. So a lot of times, those feelings about what are we going to do with this money or this extra money, or what decision are we going to make when we take this trip to Seattle on vacation, and what's that vacation going to look like, and how are we going to spend money? They're naturally aligned, and we have the conversation in real time or as we plan for a purchase. So I think yeah, we do hesitate sometimes. Well, should we spend this? Should we spend this money on a new camera or a new camera lens or something? And maybe we have the money for it, and maybe I think that it's just a dialogue that we have, and Sierra may want to, and I may think that we don't need to, that we're not leveraging the two lenses that we bought within the last however long or something. So those conversations happen. They're just, I don't know, they're not as difficult, I think, if we had conflicting principles, but
Yeah, those are some good points, I think, Tim, for sure. I was also going to add just, to the aspect of freedom, that it seems that money and budgeting can really be a constricting tool, and a lot of people see it as that, as their hands are tied and I can't spend the money, I can't do that. But Justin, you were mentioning sort of the freedom that it gives when, hey, we have a certain amount of money and we budgeted it to go on a date night. So let's go on a date night and enjoy it. And Lindsay and I have started doing that. And when we go out to eat, it feels good to be able to order a beer freely, knowing that we're paid for that, it's budgeted, and we can enjoy that. Rather, before I was, really felt constrained, and I would always just make an in-the-moment judgment call. Yeah, let's go out to eat. We're tired. We're exhausted. Now it's a lot more thought and process behind that. But what it brings up also, and Leighton, I want to ask you a question on this, is, I don't quite know where all of you guys are financially. Some may be way in the black or maybe even in the red. But I think when you give every dollar a job, that rule number one, it heightens the idea of like, hey, I only have a certain amount of money, and saving for a goal that's worthy and that's noble and that you want to do, such as a vacation or something like that, but you don't actually have the money to do it because you're not making that amount of money or your other expenses are higher. And how do you, before YNAB, currently, Leighton, what does that look for you as you sort of realize, hey, we actually do have a finite amount of money, and if we want to make certain decisions, we're either going to go into debt or we need to not go out to eat or find a cheaper cell phone plan or something like that?
Yeah, no, it's been interesting because I've seen both sides of it. Initially, I think when my audio cut out, I was just saying how coming into YNAB and based off of how we budgeted in the past, it seemed very just restrictive and things like that. And a lot of what Blake said, looking back on things and seeing what you spent. But even for instance, like right when we made YNAB, we knew we'd have to buy tires for Ashley's car, SUV, so more expensive tires. And it's something that we've been knowing is coming, but it's like $600-700, and it's just a pain to think about. Not that we don't have it, but we know we'd rather see that money stay in savings or use that on something else essentially. So when we started YNAB, that was one of the first things that we did when we had our whole checking account and savings. We just put like $800 into the tires. That way, not even knowing and just being putting almost too much money, in which I've learned from that, into each category. So now it's like we haven't bought our tires, but I'm almost just ready to go drop $600 without fretting about it, And so that's been the good thing, especially with those bigger purchases. And like you said, being able to enjoy yourself when you do go out for a couple beers or going out for a date night or something like that. So I think I'm liking it a lot. Like the YNAB piece of it was very difficult at first. Ashley's very number oriented and she's not a super saver, but she's just very good with numbers. She loves YNAB, and I get pissed off pretty quickly, to be honest. And so it's just been really interesting because we definitely have come together on it and seen like, all right, let's just put $25 extra in this. That way, next month you can do X or whatever it is. So it has really helped, and I'm looking forward to getting to next month and when things will kind of even out. And as far as paying off debts, like I have student loans, Ashley has student loans. My car just got paid off, but we have a small car payment on hers. And so we definitely have been living within our means, but it's still been stressful because we see how much we're dishing out in debt, which is almost just to get by, just student loans and some modest cars. So now it's made us want to pay that debt down quicker. So Cameron, like you said, you can have that extra money that you have been paying towards a monthly payment to put towards California or whatever it may be. So it's been interesting. I've seen both sides of it, but mainly it is refreshing to look and be able to see, oh, I can go out for a beer after work or whatnot, and versus always kind of second guessing it and knowing I should be saving it. And so it's been good for me and Ashley.
Yeah, that's really good, Leighton. Like for when you start digging in, sometimes the reality kind of sucks a little bit. Like, hey, we need $800 for freaking tires, and so that's $800 that aren't going somewhere else that we want, that we wanted to do, and so it can hurt a little bit, and sometimes the truth hurts. But what you're looking at is your actual numbers. You're not living in this fantasy land of I'm just putting it, when we need tires, I'm swiping a credit card. When we go on our trip, I'm swiping a credit card, and just getting sucked into this lifestyle of debt that you'll have to climb out of eventually, and it's completely negating any progress that you tell yourself you're making towards anything. So it's the truth of the numbers, and sometimes the reality is, like I said, it's finite, but you're dealing with reality and not this illusion of I can swipe it and get with no consequences, because those consequences are going to be so much worse later on. And the other thing I thought of, Tim, with your example of like camera lenses for Sierra, I thought of, for me, of like for Katie and I, when it comes to like clothing, Katie is not like an exorbitant spender by any means, but she does like the shop, and she loves like that dollar bin at Target and everything like that. And like for me as a natural, I've come to find I'm I guess becoming more of a saver. I might not be a natural saver, but I am more of a saver now, and so I would like look at every bullseye bag that came through the door and just think, why are we spending money on that? And so what we've done, and here's an example, Tim, is like she gets spending money and I get spending money, and like we've said, hey, look, this is the amount of money that we're willing to give. And so for her, she's got her pile of money to do whatever she wants with, and that she can save that, or she can spend it at Target, or she can buy whatever. And again, it's a stress reliever for me, because we've talked about that. That's in our prioritized plan. We're still making progress on our goals. It's not holding us back anywhere, because back when we gave that dollar a job, that Target dollar a job, that was the job it was meant for. And it's not like, okay, now I just lost 1%, or a chance to bump up my mutual funds by 1%, because we've already had that conversation about it. Not that specific sticky pad or whatever pen with a Basil on it or whatever, but that she has the freedom to do that. I walk in, hey, great, or she walks in, I'm glad you had a great day at Target, and I'm not like, I can't believe we just spent $5 more on nothing. So I think it's just a little, it's a little bit of that. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating story. But the back, before she walked in through the door, is that you guys actually sat down, and the way we do our budget for Lindsay and I is our first categories that we look at is our giving and our generosity. That's the first ones we do, and then we do the everyday expenses. We need food and our rent, our rent payment. And then we can live. And then the next one is savings. Like, how much do we sort of want to go to savings? And then we can plug in, $20 at Target if we wanted to, knowing that we've already met our goals for being good stewards and generous with our money. We're going to have a roof over our head and food on our table, and we're saving. And if we want to save more, then we have to cut back in some of those other categories, or if we really want to say no to saving to up our Target spending, or we're big skiers, so we're going to be going skiing a lot, up our, lift ticket, allotment, then those are the decisions we have to make, and it's making those actual decisions and really putting them into that really specific notion of, hey, this $1 bill I have, I can say it's going to savings, or I can give it to Target, and that decision's been made in a mutual way. And I just really have loved thinking that way because I feel good about what I'm doing with my money and how I'm saving it, but also enjoying it in the moment now. Justin, what are you sort of thinking about some of this stuff?
I really enjoy giving like a play money category. I think like Blake was talking about. So it's like, I have Justin's play money and Laura's play money, or you can call it whatever you want. But $20, $50, whatever you want. It's like, hey, I'm gonna spend that on something for me, whether that's a book that I want to read, or like this month or next month, I want to go deer hunting, so I got to buy a deer tag in Iowa, and so I'm going to buy that. But it's nice because it restrains me, but it also makes me feel good about like, yeah, that's what I want to do with my money that I set aside for this month. Laura's not going to bug me about it because that's my money that I want to spend, and then it also encourages her like, hey, like you should do something for yourself because she has such a tendency to want to save that it's like she'll just not do anything. And it's like, well, we set this money aside for you, do something that you want to spend the money on. So like that's been really good for us.
That's really good. I just love every point that we're hitting on are all like conversation starters, or it's some way to reach out to our spouse and say, get a feel for them, either encourage them in a certain way or be challenged by them, on a certain way of thinking or a certain desire to do. And again, it goes back to that bigger picture of, what are the bigger goals? Because, $20 a month of play money in your world it's probably not keeping you from achieving some long-term goal. But if you just blatantly went out and did something, and you look back on it later in the month, and then you start, making decisions of, okay, we did buy 4 camera lenses over the last 3 months. Yes, we always had the money, but at a certain point that does affect some kind of long-term goal because that's multiple hundreds of dollars now that we've spent. And it's like, no, we didn't go into debt for it, but is that helping us get to where we wanted? And so it's just neat to have those, all of those things can be conversations with your spouse to encourage each other to talk about a long-term thing. And that's what I feel like is that intangible thing that I didn't know was going to be such a cool benefit of this whole process is just how much that's intertwined to Katie and I. And yeah, we do talk about money a good amount, and specifically at like our budget meetings. But really, what we talk about is like, when do we want to buy a house, or where do we want to live, or we just had what are we going to do for preschool? Things like that. It's like, well, preschool, that's gonna, those are all things that have cost around them. But we're not talking about them in dollars and cents yet. We're talking about where do we want to go, and then when we sit down at the beginning of the month, we talk about, okay, how do we start getting to that long-term thing. So I just think it's such a cool thing how it just ties into relationships, and that can be just a conversation starter. Just to have that conversation with your spouse is so life-giving to your relationship, and it'll help you out financially. Sure, it'll be really good for you, but the fact that you can just have that conversation that's pretty money too. Oh, no pun intended. Cam?
Yeah, I think you guys have been so great. We have like maybe 10 minutes more of time that we want to honor your guys' commitment to join with us. So if you want to open up your chat window, if you sort of click your mouse over the video, you can type in anything. If there's a question, if you haven't had a chance for us to address it, type it in there real quick so we can. But I wanted to also sort of talk about how some of these immediate goals and sort of the crisis of the moment, such as, Leighton, what would you have done before, you were going to get these snow tires and you had $800? Like, has that mentality sort of changed at all for you? since then, or Justin, as you guys are figuring out, like even you and your spouse and Laura have different ways of spending. Do you guys feel bringing this giving every dollar a job, is that going to really has your mindset sort of shifted as we've been talking about this? I'll let anyone jump in there. So.
For me, it has. Can you hear me okay? I just saw Justin's chat. Okay.
Yeah, you're good, Leighton.
Okay. It's definitely making. I was just kind of scrolling through our list here and all the jobs that we have for our dollars, but it's definitely, at first it was pretty stressful just because you almost had to make priorities, and not just on the small things, but just bigger things, and especially like since we have student loans and like the car tires, just the bigger purchases. But I found that once we did, and even if it did take a couple days, just a few minutes at a time, once we did set those out, it's a lot easier to make smaller adjustments, and it's a lot easier to add in smaller categories for things, and that's what we like, kind of being 1 foot in and basically committing. We're still on the free trial package because we don't want to spend that $53, but that is in YNAB. YNAB membership or whatever it's called, and it's sitting there, so we just need to do that. But yeah, to answer your question, it's
of course, as he answers the question.
That's an account just made for that.
Hey, Leighton, go back and repeat your last 30 seconds.
All right.
Just like to answer your question.
Basically, just saying that it worked really well just once we set up all of our bigger categories, like our student loan payments and basically like car tires, things like that. So it's been a lot easier once we've got that down to make small adjustments, is what I was saying. So it's not like we have super huge things to tackle now. It's just we have car payments on there, we have student loans on there. Now it's just kind of making tweaks, and that's a lot easier than starting out.
Cool.
Awesome.
Any other specific questions from anybody? Or general?
I guess so. We've talked about how beneficial married and when you have a spouse, but these people. Do you have anything?
Hey Justin, why don't you type in your question to the chat there, because you're still breaking up. I know you moved closer to the router there, but try and type that in, and we'll get to it if you can hear us. Tim, what about you? I see you smiling over there. You look good with your beard.
Oh, no, I don't know. I'm smiling at you guys. Cameron's face or something. No, I think what I'm hearing too about relationships and open communication and conversation is what's critical. Understanding what our goals are, and even deeper than tactical goals, just foundational values. What is driving each one of these each one of these categories or jobs that we're giving our dollars. Leighton, when you were talking about the California trip or vacations, and there's not very many dollars left for the vacation fund, we can always go back to the starting point and look at where all those other dollars are going and go, well, how high do we hold the dining out category? Is that more important to us than traveling or spending time together on a trip away from the norm? And so those are all rooted in, there's the goal to set aside the time and the money for vacation, but then the value of, well, maybe it's quality time with family or time outside of the regular rhythm that drives that stuff. So anyway, the budget, I think YNAB is what really creates a structure for that, and it can get you right to what those core values are, and start having the conversations about the goals. That's where I'm hearing the value there.
Absolutely. Yeah, you nailed it, Tim. That's great. Appreciate that. Hey guys. Okay, so as we wrap up, if Justin's question comes in, we'll get to it. But again, we just want to honor your time, and then we'll wrap up the formal portion here. But other than, I think Tim just had, the moment of the night there probably. But why don't we go around and just give, just a little bit of I don't know, maybe how about just advice to one another? What's one little nugget, if somebody said, do you have a tip for, for budgeting or how I think about money? What would you say? I mean, you can take a second and think about that real quick, but just like what's a little nugget that you'd want to, impress upon us, us five here in this conversation to take away. You may have already said it tonight, and you can feel free to repeat that, but I'd love to just kind of gather that up here as we formally wrap up. And I'll just, first one to talk can go ahead. If you need to think about it, that's fine.
Yeah, as some of you guys are thinking about it, Justin, I saw that your question popped in about, how does this relate to single people? Obviously, by luck of the draw, we are all married here. But my answer to that is my one nugget that I would give you guys or anyone is that feeling freedom with your finances really is possible, but it takes a lot of hard work. The sort of idea that I had a few years ago was that most people spend 40 hours a week or more working to make money, and then they spend pretty much zero time or maybe 20 minutes once a month as they pay their credit card bills, even possibly thinking about money. And to me, that's pretty off, that ratio. When you spend 40 hours and you slave and you get frustrated and you don't like your boss and you don't like your job just to make money, and then you don't ever take the time to actually be proactive with what you do with that money that comes in by direct deposit, is an interesting thing that I think happens to a lot of people. But if you spend the time and you make the hard steps, especially the hard initial steps of reorienting your mind, financial peace is available. And it doesn't mean you're going to get immediately out of debt, perhaps, or it doesn't mean you get to go buy a house with cash, but you can take the weight off your chest and feel a lot better with your finances. But it takes hard work, but it is possible. And so for married or single, and to you guys joining us on this conversation, that's what I would say. So you've already put in, an hour, 58 minutes of hard work right now, just sort of getting your mind spinning. But now this weekend and this week, put a little bit more effort there and put the pen to paper or the mouse to the computer screen and work through those values that you're struggling with to do that. And I'll go ahead and throw it to whoever is ready with another tidbit that you'd like to share with the group.
Am I working or not?
Iowa internet is weak, man. I don't know.
All right. If I do this, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right. Sweet picture of me is. I would say, it's easy to get excited. The hardest thing is staying disciplined with it, and this is with anything new that we want to do that requires discipline, whether it's going to the gym or staying on a diet or reading every day or staying on a budget. It's easy to get started and just stick with it. So stick with it every day and don't try and do too much at once, but it's going to take a while to form a habit of doing it and to maintain that habit. So
that's great, Justin. Thank you. Leighton, what would you say?
Man. a lot of it's just from what I've figured out is basically, because we've had a decent, in our mind, decent savings account that we've basically just put away money in just to have a savings account and just to feel comfortable, and it's emergency fund, it's whatever you need it to be, but it's a larger savings account. And so for me, it was really hard to like basically get rid of that account, and we still have some money that's kind of off account, but it was really hard for me to basically put that in one account and start spending it, because that's where I feel like we've worked to have this big comfortable savings account that we won't worry if something happens to one of our jobs or health wise, and so it was really hard taking that away. But even it's almost like a weekly process. Like it's starting to feel more comfortable because, looking through YNAB and even that trip I'll take to California, it's like those are big things, but really it's kind of taking the worry level down, because you can think of, even like we have our deductibles in there, so it's really everything's covered. And obviously money, it will run out at some point if you don't spend it or you lose a job. But for me, it's been kind of getting over the hump of holding on to the savings account and really just putting it in that one big checking account and then using it and spending it up, and then kind of realizing that there is nothing else besides that, which is not easy to do, but that's what I'm working on at the moment.
And to clarify, when you're saying spin it up, but you mean assign it to categories, right? Not necessarily
Yeah, exactly.
spending it. Okay, yeah. So okay.
Correct.
Tim, what do you?
I'm hearing some feedback too.
Yeah, I think.
Anyway, yeah. So I would say something that I mean, Sierra and I both strive to do constantly is to just challenge the status quo, or challenge what we think is maybe not even just challenge, but to reevaluate what we're spending in each category. Do we, when you consider this vacation such a value, and you see where all your dollars went last month, and how you're not going to have very much next month to put toward that, challenge where those dollars are going in all of those categories. You may think that we need to spend X amount of dollars on clothing, or set aside for groceries, or eating out, or energy even, or anything, and challenge that, so that maybe you can reduce those in order to fulfill those other things that are of value too. Instead of going month to month to month thinking, well, we only have X amount of dollars to put into this category because all these other categories need to be here. So just constant reevaluation and constant challenging yourself there. And we try to do that often.
That's beautiful, man. I really like that, and you kind of took away my one little tidbit there, so appreciate that. Like, that's less talking for me, but I'll try and dovetail off of what you just said, Tim, which was really well said, but and kind of harp back on that piece of start with the bigger picture and not just the month-long picture, but it's that what Tim called values, what I've said, goals in the long run, whether those are short-term or long-term, whatever. You start there and you start talking about it, and you can dream a little bit, and then you look at the hard truth numbers and say, okay, what is the reality of our situation? So if it's, what can we actually do with what is the money that we have on hand, and what do we need that money to do until the next time that we get paid? and then you allocate that money. And whether or not you may put $5 towards your California trip, or you may not touch it, but you've discussed, your long-term goal with your spouse, and you've talked about those things, and you've readjusted those values, but then you've assigned that money, and you're not doing things that are detracting from the actual needs of what has to get done or progress towards the goals that you have. And then the next time you have a conversation about it, whether that's over dinner or whether that's at your budget meeting, you reevaluate that long-term goal and say, hey, where are we trying to go again, if it's the same place? And that may be, a more annual conversation in some categories or some topics. It may be a more regular conversation. But, as Tim just said, readdress that, challenge that, ask those questions. And the things that just start to grow are just fascinating to me. And the way that, for in my personal experience, for Katie and I, how we've been able to come on the same page on that, and the fruit that's given to our marriage in general. So, hey, with that, I'm going to wrap up the formal portion of the time. So, guys, I really appreciate you talking through, all these different thoughts on budgeting in general, and kind of just assigning dollars to the name. Real quickly, I'll just talk about rule number 2 for YNAB is save for a rainy day. And we kind of hit on some of those topics. Rule number 3, off the top of my head, is, what is it? Yeah, roll with the punches, and that's the fact that you can change. And we've kind of talked about the reevaluation. And number 4 is live off last month's income. And so we'll talk about more of those in depth at a later time. But today, as we focused in on, assigning every dollar, give every dollar a job. Just look what came out of that one concept, and we just talked for 60 plus minutes. So I just want to thank you a lot for your time. I want to tell you, we talk a lot about this on our website at blakeandcameron.com, and that's where this conversation was birthed, and that's where we're gonna have some more conversations and continue to do things like this, and maybe with guys, the exact same guys that are in the room, or anybody else that's interested. So on behalf of Cameron, I just want to thank you. And so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to end the recording. You guys are going to still stay online, and you can talk as long or as short as you want. But I just want to say thanks and have a great night.